Hey true believers, it's your friendly neighborhood Gwensday, here to break down all your favorite Marvel events and tell you how they might all possibly relate and, have led us to the upcoming title, Civil War II. Right now we're kicking off our countdown to Civil War II with Marvel's 2004 title Avengers Disassembled, which is written by Brian Michael Bendis, illustrated by David Fincher, with inks from David Mickey. The series kicks off a long chain of events that we kind of see affect everything from House of M to Decimation to Children's Crusade and Siege, and even kind of still somewhat influencing events lately like Axis that included the Avengers and the Uncanny X-Men, and even Loki, Agent of Asgard. Listen, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Gwensday, why is that important? Well, A, get out of my head, Charles. And B, because if you're reading in order, you can see the repercussions from this event kind of ripple through the time stream up until the very events going on even now. So, warning, it's about to get real spoilery in here. So if you don't want to take the downtown to run downtown, you better get off now. That being said, if you're sticking around, then I've done nothing wrong of my own volition, in the words of Vision. To get ourselves accurately kind of acquainted with everything regarding Avengers Disassembled, we kind of have to pay a little bit of homage to the title that came before it. Well, mini event, let's call it, since it's only a couple issues. And that would be Avengers Red Zone. Avengers Red Zone is actually written by one of my favorite writers. He's often well known for his work on Green Lantern stuff, and he has been one of my favorite writers as far as like Starfire from the Teen Titans, and that's Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns is also working in conjunction with Olivia Coipel. I probably am saying that wrong. I am so sorry. Don't hate me. I am awful with the English language. You'll see. And also Andy Lanning doing inks on this title. And the series launched in May of 2010. And essentially deals with the Avengers trying to stop the Red Skull after he's infiltrated the United States government from detonating this biological weapon that's hidden in Mount Rushmore. So this weapon, as it turns out, is a flesh-eating disease, which, Red Skull has kind of engineered, and the only real cure for this disease can be made from his blood. So essentially the Avengers are not only hunting down Red Skull so they can cure this virus, they're also kind of trapped in the middle of this tense sort of standoff between Wakanda and America, because Red Skull is orchestrating everything so that it looks like this attack is the Wakandans on America, which, adds a little bit of tension between teammates when you have T'Challa on board. And you don't really know what his motives are, or if he's really telling the truth or not. It's here that I kind of need to back up and give my ADHD a time to shine. Basically, I'm going to touch real quick on Wolverine, Old Man Logan, the title written by Mark Miller in September of 2010. So remember how at the end of the run, Old Man Wolverine comes to Red Skull, who is essentially, I think, supposed to be the president who is proceeding over all these territories which have been subdivided through, and given to the strongest kind of groups out there. So some of them are run by villains, or people who have actually changed and turned into villains because of everything that has led up to this. And there's also an allusion and a very clear reference to Mount Rushmore, I believe in issue number 4 of Old Man Logan Volume 2, and that would be written by Brian Michael Bendis, obviously. So, coincidence? Who knows? For me, I'm going to say that it's not, because I know Brian Michael Bendis, and he is very, very well known for, doing blackboards of events for way past what he's actually writing. So maybe, there's a little bit of something there. Although I kind of need to stop here and mention that there is a little bit of kind of connection to the MCU. So essentially, if you remember Robert Redford, who played Alexander Pierce in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Alexander Pierce is still a comic book character. He was, part of Nick Fury's original team, and he ended up being a SHIELD agent, but Alexander Pierce was working for Hydra. However, in the MCU, Alexander Pierce is all those things, plus he's also a dun-dun-dun U.S. government official. So my question is this Marvel's way of kind of alluding to the fact that perhaps Alexander Pierce did something so that it looks like there's an attack from Wakanda or on Wakanda from America? And that's kind of why, the Black Panther ends up joining sides with Captain America, because somehow they've orchestrated this thing to make it look like Bucky's doing things that aren't supposed to be, that are, acts of terrorism, and suddenly Captain America's on his side, and so who knows? Maybe. Anyways, I digress. Let's get back to the point. So the plan that happens to go through in Avengers Red Zone is orchestrated, by Red Skull, but it's also with the help of someone who was on the Department of Defense, whose name was Del Rusk. And if you kind of haven't noticed from the anagram already, you can figure it out. It's probably, not that hard. It is actually Red Skull. So, that's where that comes from. During the time of this whole Red Zone thing, event, Jennifer Walters, who is actually part of the Avengers team at this point in time, she gets infected because they've created these suits so they can go around and not be exposed to the virus, and hers ends up getting ripped off, and she's exposed to it, and she actually doesn't end up, having her flesh eaten off or anything. She just becomes sort of more feral, Savage Hulk. Anyways, she ends up attacking her teammates. Captain America is also, infected. And it's ultimately Black Panther who comes to the rescue and saves the day and stuff. And he defeats Schmidt one-on-one. And so the issues following Red Zone are all kind of the Avengers sort of getting back to a place where everything's getting back to normal again. I mean, they're still dealing with things like the Hulk, the She-Hulk being out there and not being able to control herself. And, and they end up, connecting with Bruce Banner, and Jen really gets to understand why exactly her cousin, feels the way he does, because she's isolated and she's on the run, etc., etc. It's also during this time, well, maybe a little bit further down the line, that Ant-Man's daughter, Cassandra Lang, who, if you don't know, is the superheroine named Stature, well, later becomes the superheroine named Stature. Cassie Lang is, at school, and she's talking to these little boys who are torturing fire ants, and she kind of lets them know all the things that fire ants can do, and so they stop. Meanwhile, this guy, walks up to her, and it's obviously not Scott Lang, and claims that he's here to pick her up because he's here to pick up his daughter. Cassie looks at, the little boys and tells them to tell their teacher, and goes with the man. So the man who ends up taking her is actually this guy named Charles Cooley, who had a daughter and ended up murdering her, etc., etc., and he's kind of just like grief-stricken and essentially living vicariously through Cassie. And after he takes her to a different location, he's kind of telling her how he wants her to remain innocent, just like he was trying to talk to his daughter. And that's when Ant-Man steps in after having found out about the abduction. It's also a pretty poignant time for another character who's often sort of, lesser known, and that would be Jonathan Hart, aka Jack of Hearts. Jack of Hearts is actually able to manifest what's called zero energy, and it's during, Avengers Red Zone that he sort of is going through this thing where he's becoming unstable, and he's locked in this zero room and doesn't really quite know how to deal with everything, and I guess probably the repercussions of what he knows eventually will kill him. And he's kind of, trying to figure out himself. Jack of Hearts is actually released from the Zero Room at this time. He goes and arrives at the place where Ant-Man and Cassie and Charles Cooley are, and essentially talks Ant-Man down from doing something that he might regret, because Ant-Man's got, control of Charles Cooley's gun now, and he's holding it to his head. Ant-Man listens, obviously, and Charles Cooley ends up regaining control of the gun and blasting off Jonathan Hart's hand. And in a kind of last sort of display of heroism, Jack of Hearts, aka Jonathan Hart, wraps his arms around Charles Cooley and propels them both off into the atmosphere, essentially exploding as he's become completely unstable and taking Charles Cooley with him, but not before explaining to Ant-Man that he understands now what they're doing and that the Avengers are trying to protect the world. After that comes Chuck Austen's writing of some Avengers stuff, which introduces Kelsey Lee as Lionheart, who eventually becomes, she takes on the mantle of Captain Britain. And she's kind of around for the whole Avengers Disassembled thing, though at that time she's kind of trying to get back home. So after everything with Red Zone and, Jack of Hearts' death, Disassembled kind of picks up with Jack of Hearts mysteriously returning to Earth. Ant-Man, who goes out to greet him because he had saved his daughter, is inexplicably killed after Jack of Hearts detonates himself. Also during this time, the Vision shows up in a Quinjet with Ultron bots and, tries to attack the surviving members of the Avengers at the mansion. She-Hulk goes kind of crazy and into this frenzy, and she ends up ripping Vision in half. Anyways, it's also during... I also have to kind of, as an aside, point out the fact that in 2010's, Old Man Logan, it also included Ultron bots. In fact, the only Ultron bot that everybody knows of, I think it's 5 or 8, and I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but later on in the Bendis run, we see, that there's maybe more than one Ultron bot out there. There's a patrolling Thor's guard who works for Dr. Doom. You should see issue 3, page 2 of Bendis' run of Old Man Logan to see what I'm talking about. Obviously, if you've read Secret Wars, you know that God King Doom does have a bunch of Thors that kind of police the areas for him, so I thought that was really interesting too. So essentially what happens is when She-Hulk rages out in, Red Zone, she does it again in Disassembled, and then also Hawkeye ends up, sacrificing himself because he's been wounded to take down a Kree warship. Sure, we all know he's not really dead. I mean, we've all read House of M. We've all possibly read Secret Invasion, and we know that in Dark Reign and Young Avengers, that a sassy young Kate Bishop kind of gives him a stern talking to about why she took up the mantle of Hawkeye. So no, don't worry. 616 Clint Barton is fine for right now. So it turns out all the bad things that happened in Avengers Disassembled are kind of, or they come to be because of, well, Scarlet Witch, who goes a little bit off the deep end after she finds out that her children, Billy Kaplan and Tommy Shepard, aren't actually real. They are, in this run, revealed to be magical constructs that were sort of created by her from the essence of the demon Mephisto, and also from the soul fragments of Master Pandemonium. And through her, like, subconscious mind, she creates these children. So once she finds out that they're not real, because her reality warping has kind of already started to make her go a little bit crazy, she starts slipping off the edge, starts thinking that the Avengers are going to take her kids again, and that's when Doctor Strange has to step in and hypnotize her with the Eye of Agamotto, and then send her off with her father. The reason why I kind of want to stop here and point out the fact that this is a really, really important detail to this story is because the Eye of Agamotto is actually said to be able to span distances and dispel disguises and illusions. It also presumably records everything that it sees and is able to show people the future, as it has shown Doctor Doom, you know, that when he tries to take it from Brother Voodoo, that it really doesn't do anything for him in the future, and so Doctor Doom loses interest. So could it be that maybe, you know, the Scarlet Witch has been shown all of this by the Eye of Agamotto, and it's not actually a future that's come to pass yet, but just give it a chance. I mean, if you know anything about any of the big reveals that have happened in the later, you know, Secret Wars 2 titles, then you kind of know that it's quite possible, especially with everything with Axis. Who knows? Anyways, it's all there if you really, really want to take the time to delve into it. You'll start to see what I mean more and more once we swing into the next couple, you know, events. And what I'd like to do with the next ones, since they're so closely related, is kind of lump together House of M and Decimation, which chronologically were inspired by this event. If you have any questions in the meantime, if you want to talk to me about, you know, what you're theorizing for Marvel Civil War 2, or maybe you just want to tell me that, like, I'm insane and I should be locked in a bunker like Cindy Moon, then go ahead. Just hashtag me Road to Civil War 2, and make sure that you follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and if you like the video, give it a Fonzie. Anyways, in the meantime, just remember that with great titles comes the need for great literacy. Stay reading, encourage young people to read, and until then, I'll see you.